Welcome to Tardisian Files. In the words of the 15th Doctor, there are powers beyond this universe. Ancient beings older than time itself, with abilities that defy the laws of physics. But who are they? What do they want? And where did they come from? Join us in this mini-series where we will explore one of the most elusive concepts in the Doctor Who universe, the secrets of the Pre-Universe. In Part 2, we discuss the inhabitants of the Pre-Universe and the different species and power dynamics that were at play in this ancient prehistoric realm. Forces such as magic and astrology governed this universe, and many of these beings lived only to rule, conquer, repeat. So in this episode, we will try to uncover why did the Pre-Universe end? Much like the eventual death of N-Space, the Pre-Universe also came to an end. Though accounts differ, it appears that the end of the Pre-Universe and the Big Bang which started the main universe were separate events following on from one another. So what happened? The novel Time Zero describes the time before Event 1, being the Big Bang, as Time Zero. This particular point in time, if it can even be referred to as such, was a period just before the Big Bang where there was no time. The book, The Time Traveller's Diary, advises readers never to travel back to Time Zero, and with good reason. When the 7th Doctor tricked the Vist into travelling back to Time Zero, thinking that they'd be able to take over the universe before the Time Lords had, they instead became trapped in Time Zero. The absence of time meant the Vist, who were beings from N-Space and governed by the physical laws of cause and effect, were unable to move past Time Zero. They became trapped there for eternity. So what actually triggered Time Zero? According to the records of Rassilon in the novel Divided Loyalties, beings known as the Gods of Ragnarok were responsible for destroying the Pre-Universe. Having crossed over from their own dimension, the Gods of Ragnarok supposedly tried to conquer the Pre-Universe, but when they failed to fully take control, they destroyed it, just before the main universe began. This is supported by the audio Signs, in which River Song states that the Pre-Universe had been destroyed by a war. Combining these two accounts, one can assume that the Gods of Ragnarok were responsible for the Pre-Universe, either destroying it at Time Zero, triggering the Big Bang, or wiping it out completely, leaving behind a void, which could potentially have been filled by jettisoned fuel by the time-jumping spaceship Terminus, triggering a pretty Big Bang, as seen in the episode Terminus. In either case, the Pre-Universe ended with a cataclysm. So who survived, and how did they do it? In the novels Millennial Rights and All-Consuming Fire, both the 6th and 7th Doctors explain that to survive the end of the Pre-Universe, this reality's version of the Time Lords sealed themselves in a bunker pocket dimension, jumping into that dimension at the last second, and then emerging a second later into the new universe. However, when they emerged, they found that the laws of physics in this new universe were different to those that they had been governed by in the Pre-Universe. What's more, they were immune to these new physical laws, which gave them godlike powers in their new home. These survivors became the Great Old Ones, going on to be known as the Great Intelligence, the Guardians of Time, and the Elder Gods. Some of these Greater Old Ones would go to pass the time by playing games with the mortal species that would evolve in this universe. Others would become bound to protect this universe and maintain the balance, while others would try to resume their old roles as rulers and attempt to manifest physically in the main universe. These Greater Old Ones were not the only survivors of the Pre-Universe, however. If the audio Nightmare Fair is to be believed, the Toymaker was another survivor of the Pre-Universe, who escaped long before its destruction into another reality, only to be dragged back into the new universe by the Big Bang, also giving him godlike powers in this new universe, which he used to create his new domain, the Toy Room. Additionally, in The Impossible Planet, the Beast reveals that he survived the Pre-Universe's destruction as he was imprisoned on Croptor during the Cataclysm. Likewise, in the tortured episode End of Days, it was revealed that the Beast's son, Abaddon, and Abaddon's rival, Pupcum, were imprisoned in the time-space anomaly that would later become the Cardiff Rift. Additionally, the two Zodiac-affiliated entities, the Mandragora Helix and the distantly related Ancient Lights, also survived, though through unknown means. The Ancient Lights took on a form that reflected their namesake in the new universe, while the Mandragora Helix became a spiral of energy, within which its controlling consciousness resided. The Mandragora Helix was, as far as we know, the only member of the Helix intelligence to survive the Big Bang. Another species that survived the fall of the Pre-Universe was encountered by the 13th Doctor in the episode It Takes You Away, and it was called the Solitract. Unlike its fellow survivors, the Solitract was a friendly, powerful being which sought to belong in the new universe. Also unlike the other Pre-Universe beings, its energies were incompatible with the physical laws of the new universe. So, during the universe's formation, the Solitract was expelled from the universe to the Solitract plane, so that the universe could form properly without the Solitract's presence destabilising the process. So, with the survivors of the Pre-Universe now in the main universe, how did they make themselves known to the inhabitants of N-Space? Having survived the fall of the Pre-Universe, many of the surviving Pre-Universe inhabitants began to enjoy and exploit their newfound godhood. As such, we know of many of the survivors of N-Space due to their interactions with the Doctor and other species in the new universe throughout history. Please note that due to time constraints and the abundance of extended lore, I will stick to the Pre-Universe's survivors' televised appearances where possible, though do note that many of these species have returned various times in the Doctor Who extended media. Starting in the 15th century, the Mandragora Helix drew the Fourth Doctor's TARDIS into itself in order to break free from its domain and travel to Italy at the start of the Renaissance period. When it arrived there, it manipulated the Brotherhood of Demnos in an attempt to take over Earth, before being thwarted by the Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane. Unbeknownst to both the Doctor and the Mandragora Helix, the Helix had left its mark on human history, as the Brotherhood of Demnos reorganised after the Mandragora was defeated, becoming a cult known as the Orbis Pastramo. This new cult was split into the red and white chapters, each of them following a holy book derived from Duke Giannio's diary, which details the events of the Mandragora Helix's invasion and details of what Sarah Jane had told him about the future. These two chapters would be at odds with one another for centuries, both sides believing that Sarah Jane was the herald of a new age, with the red chapter believing that Sarah Jane had to be killed, while the white chapter sought to protect her. As such, the Orbis Pastramo continued to operate until the early 2000s, antagonising Sarah Jane for several years from the shadows, and only ceasing to exist when the last red chapter agent was killed by Sarah Jane's friend Josh Townsend, in the audio story Dreamland. Moving on, in the 1700s, the Great Intelligence made its first contact on Earth, coming across the master of the Detsen Buddhist monastery in Tibet, as the master's mind served the astral plane. The intelligence possessed him and began its invasion. Unbeknownst to the intelligence, its first contact on Earth would overlap with its third, after an older, wiser great intelligence manifested on Earth in the 1800s, in the form of psychic snow, hoping to duplicate human DNA in ice form, allowing it to permanently live on and then later take over Earth. Only to later be stopped by the 11th Doctor and the Paternoster gang when a variant of Clara Oswald died and caused the snow to mimic the grieving tears of her loved ones. Later in 1935, the younger intelligence had lived on in the body of the Detsen Master, keeping him alive for 300 years and having him build robotic Yeti for it to inhabit, splitting itself across several Yeti control spheres to act as the Yeti's controlling consciousness. The younger intelligence intended to manifest as planet-covering slime to assimilate the whole planet Earth, but it was stopped by the Second Doctor and Edward Travers. A few years later, in 1943, Fenric was released from his flask, where he'd been imprisoned since the 3rd century, after being imprisoned by an early incarnation of the Doctor. Fenric had spent centuries manipulating the timelines and creating cursed lineages of families, culminating into people who would eventually, and unwittingly, bring about his freedom. However, his freedom was to be cut short when his acolyte, the Hemivore known as the Ancient One, destroyed his host body, freeing his essence into the universe and allowing him to continue causing mayhem for the other Elder Gods in his quest for power. Later that same century, though accounts differ whether it was in 1969 or 1975, the Great Intelligence manifested again, on its second attempt to take over Earth. This time taking on the form of a web-like parasitic fungus, it attempted to take over London via the underground, only to be stopped once more by the Second Doctor, along with Unit and the Brigadier. Near the end of the 20th century, the Sorceress Morgaine crossed over from her universe to N-Space, arriving in Carbury, 1997. She later released the demon, the Destroyer, in her attempts to take over the world. However, she soon lost control over the Destroyer, who intended to devour the planet Earth before moving on to the rest of the universe. He was defeated when the Brigadier shot him with silver bullets, a substance that was lethal to the demon. Moving into the 21st century, incursions from these pre-universe survivors became more frequent. In 2008, Abaddon and Pupcom were set free from the Cardiff Rift due to the manipulations of Billis Manger, causing Torchwood 3 to unintentionally release the two demons. Abaddon was defeated by Jack Harkness when the demon was overwhelmed as he absorbed Jack's infinite life force. Pupcom was later defeated by the Light after Torchwood 3 helped Billis Manger to imprison the Dark, cutting the demon off from his allies. The following year, in 2009, an astrological conjunction event brought the Mandragora Helix's sister species, the Ancient Lights, to Earth. They began possessing Martin Truman before using him to go on to possess everyone else born under each of the different star signs. They reached the second to last house, the House of Aries, in their attempt to spread what they believed to be peace on Earth. Though the Ancient Lights supposedly had good intentions, they were stopped by the Bannerman Road gang when Luke Smith broke the Ancient Lights' hold over the possessed, breaking their circle. With the conjunction event over, the Ancient Lights could no longer remain on Earth, and so they fled once more to the stars, taking Truman with them. Beyond Earth, a similar being to the Great Intelligence manifested on the planet Vortis, the Animus. Much like the Great Intelligence in the Web of Fear, the Animus adopted the form of a parasitic fungus, and took control of the planet's native Zarbi, making them aggressive and unruly, and caused the dominant species of Vortis, the Menoptera, to flee to the moon of Pictos. Ruling Vortis for countless generations, the Animus devastated the planet, reducing it to a barren state, causing the remaining Menoptera on Vortis to evolve into the Optera. The Animus intended to extend itself across the planet Vortis, like the Great Intelligence had intended to do on Earth in 1935, and eventually spread across the universe. It was defeated by the First Doctor, Ian, Barbara and Vicky using a weapon called the Isotope, which rapidly decayed its cells, allowing the Menoptera to finally return to Vortis. At an unknown point in time, the White Guardian recruited the Fourth Doctor and Romana to locate and assemble the key to time, its segments scattered across time and the universe. For the majority of their quest, the Doctor and Romana were pursued by the Black Guardian, who recruited his own agents, such as the Shadow, to try and steal the key to time from them, before it was completed. When this failed, the Black Guardian attempted to trick the Doctor into relinquishing it by posing as the White Guardian. Seeing through this ruse quickly, the Doctor gave the White Guardian enough time to remotely use the key before fleeing from the Black Guardian, now angrily chasing him across time and space to enact revenge. This chase would last into the Doctor's fifth incarnation, when the Black Guardian recruited Vizsla Turlough to become a companion to the Doctor in order to kill him. When Turlough failed, the Black Guardian and the White Guardian set up the race to enlightenment, having the lesser race known as the Eternals compete for the Enlightenment Crystal. When the race was won by Turlough and the Doctor, Turlough was given the choice to take the Black Guardian's offer of anything he desired, including the crystal, in exchange for the Doctor. Fed up of the turmoil the Black Guardian had caused him, Turlough chose not to take the prize, hurling the crystal at the Black Guardian, temporarily killing him as contact with the crystal proved fatal to his physical form. Later, in the 42nd century, the Torchwood Archive's Walker expedition to Croptor accidentally released the Beast from his prison. His escape was narrowly thwarted, however, by the 10th Doctor and Rose Tyler, destroying the Beast in both mind and body. Learning the secret of Croptor's impossible orbit around a black hole, the Doctor destroyed the gravity field holding the planet in place. Meanwhile, on the expedition's escape rocket, Rose ejected a possessed Toby Z into space, causing the Beast to fall into the black hole. And finally, back in 2023, the 14th Doctor, Donna Noble and Unit came face to face with the Toymaker. Having exploited the Doctor's use of a superstition to fight the Not Things at the edge of the universe as a doorway back into this realm, the Toymaker challenged the Doctor to a rematch from their first televised game. While the Toymaker won the game of Cut, the Doctor invoked the rule of best out of three, pointing out how they fought to a draw. The Toymaker met his match when he forced the Doctor to regenerate, instead causing him to bi-generate, creating the 15th Doctor alongside the 14th. Now outmatched, the Toymaker inevitably lost a game of catch to the two Time Lords, and became imprisoned in a toy box that used to serve as the portal to his domain. But before he folded in on himself, he gave the Doctors a stern warning. "My legions are coming." This latest encounter with a Great Old One can only make us wonder, what are these legions going to be? Will they be more survivors from the pre-universe? Beings that, like the Toymaker, escaped its destruction by fleeing to another dimension? Well, you guys know what I think, but we'll have to wait until May 11th to find out for sure. And that brings us to the end of our Secrets of the Pre-Universe miniseries. We covered what the Pre-Universe was, what kind of beings lived there, and how the survivors of this universe have continued to impact the main universe and their interactions with the Doctor. I hope you all enjoyed hearing about the origins of the gods and myths of Doctor Who, and perhaps we will soon get to learn more about this primordial reality and the beings that once resided within it in this new era of Doctor Who. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and share with your friends. You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Tardisian Files Podcasts, where we post clips of new episodes as they're released. You can also follow the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Music so you never miss a newly released episode. Thank you for listening, and as always, see you next time on Tardisian Files.